Hello, honeys, and welcome back to the Beesness. I'm very happy to dive in this week with you as we've got a nice variety of stories. I wasn't too overwhelmed. Thankfully, the universe has decided I have suffered enough for challenging it. For those of you who were expecting and looking forward to the Hatshepsut episode, I'm sorry. I really am. I'm pretty tired of giving excuses, as I'm sure you are hearing them. But this time I do have a really good one. I took a good solid smack to the head in our game Saturday. I was pretty sure I was mildly concussed, and so I did not want to invite too much screen time and make things worse for myself. But now we're back. We have a different episode planned to drop already for Thursday, so I'm thinking the Hatshepsut one will come out sometime in not the week we're in right now, but next. And without further ado, here is your Beesness. Headlines announced last week that 40,000 pieces of graffiti have been discovered in Venice in a promising start to a new survey there. The city is already known for its historical graffiti of all kinds, from symbols to doodles, phrases, etc., on nearly all its surfaces. The new part is this official survey and analyzation initiative and its subsequent discoveries. The research is being spearheaded by Ca' Foscari University of Venice, and medievalists.net says, quote, despite mapping only 20% of Venice's urban area, the project has already uncovered around 40,000 graffiti pieces, end quote. One of the next landmarks to be surveyed is the Doge's Palace. So, why we care about this project? The graffiti in this case is carved into stone, meaning it took time and was extremely intentional. As a result, we can see from it the sort of craftsmanship and the tools of the era. It also allows us to connect people across time. Because, as study lead Flavia de Rubes says, quote, many people have left their mark inside the Doge's Palace. With our research, we will link those signatures to the graffiti we discovered around the city and the lagoon. This will highlight stories of apparently marginal people and show us where they went, enriching our knowledge of the Venetian cultural landscape over the centuries, end quote. The group has received 30,000 euros in funding for the project of the Doge's Palace. That it has received such funding from national and other grant sources proves the importance of this project. It also deserves attention because it's having real effects on understandings of art history and regular history. For example, they have already been able to trace changes in the signature of Theodorus Rallus post-travels. Rallus was an important figure in 18th century Italy. Furthermore, the project findings will be made completely accessible on public databases, as well as having video and audio guides in various languages, so it's set to be extremely inclusive and educational. Shifting over to more institutional news, Hauser & Wirth has announced plans to mount a rare exhibition of major museum-loaned works by Eva Hesse. Of course, the next question is, who is Eva Hesse? She was born in 1936 and died of a brain tumor at age 34. She was a sculptor who, according to Art News, quote, is considered one of the titans of post-minimalist art despite the fact that she only had one solo exhibition in her lifetime at New York's Fishback Gallery in 1968, end quote. The exhibition will show 5 works in total, hence its relatively boring name of Eva Hesse, 5 sculptures. The 5 works in question come from major museum collections The exhibition will open May 2nd at the gallery's 22nd Street location in New York. So, why this headline grabbed my attention? First of all, Hesse's work is made from materials that do not travel well and are relatively fragile, specifically latex, fiberglass, and industrial plastics. So, this is an extremely rare opportunity for viewing, especially of multiple works at the same time. It is also a big scholarly deal. This exhibition will come with a publication by the name of Eva Hesse Exhibitions 1972 to 2022, as well as a Hesse Symposium, which will feature speakers including the art historian Elizabeth Lobvici and Hesse's sister, Helen Hesse-Cherish, with whom Hesse fled Nazi Germany as children. Last week also saw several stories that were interesting because they were, at their core, about laws as they relate to art. First, we saw speculation grow in the Spanish press over a $4.7 million tax bill that was paid off with mystery Goyas. The anonymous individual paying off these taxes used a combination of artworks by famous old master artists, namely Francisco Goya and Francisco de Zuberan, which combined were worth over 4 million euros or 4.3 million US dollars. From what little is known about the collection that was surrendered, it included images, sketches from some of his most famous series, The Disasters of War, The Disparates, the Los Proverbios, as well as Los Caprichos. Art News reports that, quote, these works amounted to about 20% of all income tax taken in Álava, the regional government responsible for the collection of the taxes, according to El Diario, which first reported the news, end quote. So this tax bill of over 4.3 million euros, 4.7 million US dollars, was paid and owned to, as I said, that local government of Álava in Spain's northern Basque country. Possibly because of its incredibly high amount, everyone also noticed the anonymity and became suspicious of this transaction. The media, in particular, became double suspicious about the possible candidates for such a tax bill. They settled on the Celaya Foundation, which manages the estate of Juan Celaya, who was a local businessman that passed in 2016. There are several odd points of this story that similarly caught my attention. For example, as ArtNet says, quote, the Celaya Foundation itself does not owe any tax, so it is not clear who took possession of these works and subsequently defaulted on their tax payments. El Diario has suggested that the in-kind payment may be related to debts owed by the battery manufacturer Segasa, which was founded by Juan Celaya in 1934. However, that company still owed 1.3 million euros or 1.4 million US dollars in taxes in 2023, end quote. Concerns were raised over the fact that some of these works were already, for all intents and purposes, part of public heritage. Some were on loan to local fine arts museums or else the Guggenheim in Bilbao. The final straw of suspicion, so to speak, came with the realization that the values of the works had been inflated upon this payment in kind. Art News and El Diario point to two specific examples. The first, the Goya etchings as a unit received an insurance valuation of over 190,000 euros or over 200,000 US dollars in 2018 before being loaned. They are now estimated at 1.3 million euros or $1.6 million. The Álava Treasury statements in regards to these price increases say that the 2018 estimates were not official appraisals. But these numbers were used for exhibition insurance, which means they must have been formalized in some way. Art News has requoted a Treasury spokesperson who has stated in the Spanish press, quote, "Accepting cultural heritage in lieu of money to clear a tax bill is perfectly legal. It is also not subject to a wealth tax," end quote. The article's author takes care to note that this is not true only of Spain, but is also policy in European nations such as the UK. In one of the most ironic stories I have possibly ever heard in my life, an Australian court also ruled last week that a women's only exhibit must allow male visitors. The story essentially starts as such. An Australian museum, more specifically the Ladies' Lounge, as a part of the Tasmania's Museum of Old and New Art, aka the MONA, attempted to highlight historical misogyny by banning male visitors from its space. But of course, because irony is such an asshole, and so are many men, a dude filed a gender discrimination complaint over it and won on April 9th. MONA representatives, according to the BBC, say, quote, "We are deeply disappointed by this decision," end quote. Getting into the details a little further here, the space in question, the Ladies' Lounge, is making a point to make its space gender exclusive because the space references in its design historical exclusion based on gender. The space is very velvet-laden, old swag because of its old Australian pub-based concept. It has been open since 2020. It contains some of the museum's most hailed works, from Picasso's to Sidney Nolan's. To be honest with you guys, I don't know that name either, but he sounds like a pretty big deal. Now, Australian pubs had excluded women until 1965. So the point here was to reverse this historical precedent by offering champagne and service to female attendees while refusing men at the door. The oh-so-very pleasant gentleman bringing forth the suit was Jason Lau, a New South Wales resident who pulled the classic serial killer move of representing himself in the court case. The BBC reports that, quote, "He argued that the museum had violated the state's Anti-Discrimination Act by failing to provide a fair provision of goods and services in line with the law to him and other ticket holders who didn't identify as female," end quote. The museum responded, of course, that this rejection is the entire purpose of the artwork. Plus, Tasmanian law allows for this type of discrimination because it is, quote, "designed to promote equal opportunity for a group of people who had been historically disadvantaged," end quote. Unfortunately, the male judge also decided to purposely overlook the entire point here. Quote, in his ruling, Richard Gruber dismissed the argument, finding that it was not apparent how preventing men from experiencing the famous artworks held within the Ladies' Lounge achieved that goal, end quote. Of course, he did reveal hints of misogynistic attitudes throughout his statements regarding this trial. He objected to the mild use of the courtroom as an extension space for the lounge's quote-unquote performance art via matching attire and synchronized movements. These eventually led Gruber to claim that their behavior was, quote, "inappropriate, discourteous, and disrespectful, and at worst, contumelious and contemptuous," end quote. Sadly, the ruling against the artwork means that its future is TBD because, of course, the purpose, the meaning will be lost if the decision is ultimately upheld. If the artist has anything to say about it, however, and based on her own 2 cents, she will have things to say about it, that won't happen. Kersha Kashele had previously told the BBC that the case made it feel like her artwork was coming to life, while indicating she would fight all the way to the Supreme Court if pushed to it to protect the integrity of her goal with this project. She did admit as well that having the ladies' lounge shut down could help drive home its intended message, despite her disappointment with this potential outcome. Of course, I obviously hope that it will continue to remain open, though I see her silver lining attitude towards both outcomes. All right, honeys, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you have enjoyed your weekend and that your week goes well. I will catch you all on Thursday with the first episode dropping in our brand new series titled Art That Pisses People Off. In that particular episode, we'll be looking at art that gets in your space, literally, physically, and talking about why exactly we saw such a phase of it in the modern era and why it still matters today. Talk to you soon, honeys, and in the meantime, take care of yourselves. This podcast was created, produced, written, hosted, edited, and fact-checked by master's graduate Celia Bugno. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on all of your favorite streaming platforms as well as your social medias.